It seems like all INFJs are writers. Is that true? When I first found out I was an INFJ, I didn't feel like I was a writer or that I wanted to be a writer. But as it turns out, here I am, a writer. So are all INFJs meant to be writers? Is that a requirement? And if INFJs are writers, why? What is it that makes us drawn to writing? We'll talk about all of that and more on this episode of The Quiet Ones.
I believe the biggest problem in the world is that people don't understand themselves enough. This show is designed to help you understand your INFJ personality, heal from your past, and create a life that you love. I'm Sarah Kuhn, and this is the Quiet Ones podcast.
Are all INFJs writers? Is it really required? The short answer is no. It's not required, and not every single INFJ in the world feels the need to write, but most do. Every INFJ that I've spoken to is either a writer or wants to be a writer. And those that want to be generally have a personal journal that they write in. Why is that? Writing is more than just a hobby for us as INFJs. It's a healing process. We are very good at soaking up other people's emotions. We're also really good at taking care of others, often at the expense of ourselves. These are things that we do naturally. We don't have to learn them. They're just ingrained in us from the time that we're born. It often takes us years and years to learn about our personality and realize what's going on in this process. I was 27 when I learned about my personality type, and I was 29 when I really started studying it. That's 29 years of soaking up others' emotions and not knowing how to deal with it. 29 years of taking care of everyone else and not knowing how to take care of myself. That's a lot to unpack and undo. Writing was my refuge. Yes, I saw a counselor and it really did help. But what helped me the most was diving into what had happened to me in my past and exploring it while I was writing about it. It helped me sort through what I was thinking without the fear of anybody judging me. It helps me put my thoughts together in a way that makes sense to me, and that helps me explain what I'm really trying to say. Writing also helps me sort out what I'm feeling. It's not easy for INFJs to think about what we're feeling. It often takes me months to name the feelings that I'm experiencing when I'm going through something really big or really heavy. Writing helps me with that process. It helps me to sort through all of those feelings and to name them, which for me is the first step to walking through them. I have found that the more that I write, the more I understand about myself and the more that I can heal from what's happened to me. I strongly believe that's why so many INFJs are drawn to writing. We're looking for a way to organize our thoughts and feelings and to heal from the things that we've gone through in our lives. No one has an easy life. I know it's easy to look at Instagram and Facebook and think that these picture perfect people have perfect lives, but that's just not the case. And it doesn't matter whether you're rich or old, young, poor, educated, not educated. Everyone has things that they struggle with. Everyone has challenges. Everyone has things that bring them to their knees, things that they can't even imagine being able to make it through. Everyone has experienced something where you look back and you can't believe that you made it through that. Writing is the answer. Writing will help you heal, it will help you cope, it will help you understand, and it will help you move forward. Once you've entered that healing process, once you've gotten started, then you can start to look for more. You can start to look forward. What do you want to do with your life? What's your purpose in life? What mark do you want to leave on the world? Writing will help you answer all of those questions. It's just as important to look forward and explore as it is to look backwards. We'll talk more about this later. I want to talk now about writing versus editing. Most people, when they sit down to write, get stuck on finding the right or the correct words. I've done this myself. Instead of just writing, we start editing what we're writing as we write it. Then the confusion sets in, perfectionism gets going, and all of a sudden you get locked up. You can't come up with another word to write to save your life. I've done this so many times. When I first started writing, this happened to me all the time. I realized that I had to stop thinking about what I was writing and just write. Don't edit, just write. Write as it comes to you and think about if it makes sense and if it's the way that you want to say it later. There's a book called The Artist's Way that a lot of people read, especially INFJs. And in the book, the author has this practice called morning pages. She says to write for 30 minutes every morning without stopping or editing. I've done this a lot, though I'm not good at writing in the morning, but it helps to put what you're thinking down on paper or on the computer and to explore it a little bit. See where some of your thoughts go without judgment or criticism. I encourage you, if you'd like to start a writing practice and you don't have one, to give this a try. And maybe you're not a morning person like I am, but it doesn't have to be in the morning. It could be over your lunch break. It could be when you go home from work. It could be before you go to bed. Just make sure that you find time every single day. And it doesn't have to be 30 minutes either. You can start with 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever works for you. Just find time to get started. Many INFJs struggle to find out what career they want to pursue or what their purpose is in life. It's something that some of us, like me, struggle with for years. There's a lot of fear in talking about something that you want, especially if it's completely different from what you're doing now. I'll give you an example. In 2017, I was unemployed and I was looking for a job actively, but I was bored because I'm kind of a workaholic. But I was still also trying to work through the fact that I'd been laid off and my whole world had just crumbled. I was trying to figure out what to do next. So I mentioned to a friend that I was thinking about starting a YouTube channel because I had all this extra time and I thought, well, I might as well use it. She said something like, "Oh my God, no, don't be one of those people. Not everyone hits it big on YouTube, and you're definitely not going to. You'll just look like another annoying idiot who's involved in what's essentially a pyramid scheme. So no, don't do that. That's ridiculous." I don't know what kind of reaction I was expecting, but that certainly wasn't it. Even though I felt like she didn't understand YouTube at all, I still let her words get to me. And it was a whole nother 2 years before I actually started making videos. The point of me making videos was to help people, not to make a bunch of money. But instead of helping people, I let her opinion and her fears hold me back. When I started my blog, I didn't tell anyone about it because I was afraid of the same kind of reaction and afraid that their fears would get to me and would stop me. I didn't want to be stopped from doing this thing that I had really wanted to do, that I'd been thinking about for a long time. So instead of talking about it, I wrote about it. That's how I worked out how I felt without the influence of others. Now, I'm not saying that it's wrong to tell people what your plans are or to share what you're thinking about doing. Just make sure that their opinions and their fears don't hold you back. Writing can help you sort through a lot, especially when it comes to your purpose in life. You already know what you want to do. There's a voice inside of you that's pulling you in a certain direction. Maybe it's something completely different than what you've done. Maybe it's something that requires you to be really brave or to make a big change in your life. Regardless of what you have to work through, writing will help you immensely. So just to circle back real quick to our original question, are all INFJs meant to be writers? The answer is no, not all INFJs are meant to be writers. We're not all going to make it our career. We're not all going to have a blog. We're not all going to have a podcast or a YouTube channel. But a lot of us are writers. A lot of us find healing in writing, whether it's sharing our stories or sharing other stories. It's important to us and it helps us immensely. If you're thinking about writing, I really encourage you to give it a shot. And don't just try it once and decide whether it's right for you or not. Commit to 6 months of trying it. Commit to a year of trying it before you give up. Because nobody's good at something that they haven't done before, right? You have to have a little bit of practice. You have to have an established writing practice. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. I'm going to give you 10 tips to establish a consistent writing practice that will help you a lot. It's time for Ask Sarah, the portion of the show where you show up with your questions. We record this section of the show live on Instagram, which is at INFJWoman, every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Come join us and get your questions answered too. All right, so I have some questions that people have asked me, and I want to just go ahead and dive in. So the first question is, are INFJs neurodivergent? Do INFJs have autism and or ADHD? Is that how you explain why we are the way that we are? This question is really hard for me to answer because I don't want to be... Oh, sorry. Knocked my stand there. This question is really hard for me to answer because I don't want to be rude or insensitive or come off as mean, because that's not what I'm trying to do at all. I'm not really certain why people want to associate our personality characteristics with a mental illness or a mental challenge or even a medical condition at all. It's certainly not the same. Not all INFJs have autism. Some do, but not all of them do. Not all INFJs are neurodivergent. Some are, but not all of them are. Some have ADHD, some don't. But those aren't the reasons that we have the personality that we do. My brother has autism, so I understand that autism runs on a spectrum, that some people have different symptoms and different levels of those symptoms. But I've seen what autism looks like firsthand, and my brother and I are not the same. I don't have autism, but he does. One of my good friends has ADHD, and I've seen her symptoms, and she's told me about them, and I guarantee you we're not the same either. Now, for me, I have a couple of different mental illnesses, so I'm not trying to say anything that's, bad about people who have mental illness. I have major depression. I have an anxiety disorder, and I also have OCD. So there's nothing wrong or bad about having a mental illness, but our personality type being associated with a mental illness, that really rubs me the wrong way. To me, it feels like it's very offensive when people try to connect those things, because to me, it's saying that there's something wrong with us, something that needs medication to be fixed. It just feels like it's the wrong way of looking at things, right? Our brains are not deformed, right? Just being an INFJ doesn't make your brain deformed. It doesn't mean that you have a brain injury or a mental illness. And it's just, I don't understand why people want to connect that, because to me, it makes me feel like they're saying, well, we're broken and messed up, and that's the problem, and there needs to be a fix for it. But in my head, there is no fix for being an INFJ. It's not something that needs to be fixed. It's not something that requires medication to deal with, I feel like we're perfect just the way that we are. And I started this Instagram account. I started my podcast and my blog to help all INFJs and other people too understand that you're not broken or messed up. Your personality type doesn't mean that you have some sort of deficiency or deformity. You're perfect just the way that you are. And there are other people out there that are like you. And there's nothing wrong with you just because you're not like the vast majority of people. So yeah, I don't know why people want to associate being an INFJ with a problem, because to me it's not a problem. Okay. So the next question is, how do I find my purpose in life? I get this question a lot. And I think that it's because a lot of INFJs struggle with finding your purpose. I know that I did. I struggled for a long time. So this is something that I focused on a lot in my blog and my podcast. And there's tons of resources that I have about it. If you go to infjwoman.com/purpose, you will find what I'm talking about. There's a free guide that you can get that's called Find Your Purpose in Life as an INFJ. And it talks about 3 important questions that you need to tackle. So, who am I? Why am I here? And how can I help? Those are the 3 important things. And the guide goes through each one of those things, and it has exercises that help you determine each one of those things too. So make sure you go check it out. You can find it at infjwoman.com/purpose. Okay, next question. It's hard for me to start writing. Do you have any advice to get started? It was really, really hard for me to get started writing too. I felt like for a long time that I wanted to be a writer. I just didn't know how. So the best thing that I found to get started writing is to start writing 15 to 20 minutes a day. Whenever you have time, just make sure that you stick to a consistent time, because that really helps a lot. A lot of people there's a book called The Artist's Way, and in the book they talk about morning pages. So a lot of people do that. I find it really hard to write in the morning. I'm not really a morning person. So I try to set aside 15 to 20 minutes, whether it's at lunchtime or after I get home from work. Just try to find a consistent time. And sometimes it moves around because it's not always, you don't always have time at lunch. But the point is to just sit down and write. And whether you're writing for like a journal, or whether there's something specific that you want to talk about, even if there is something specific but you don't know how to get started, just sit down and write. Because this whole practice will train your brain that when you're sitting down in front of your computer or with your journal, that you're training your brain that this is the time to write, and this is what you're going to do during this time when you sit down, when you are in this specific place. It helps a lot, because when I first started, I had these like moments of inspiration, and they were always at times when I wasn't able to sit down and write. And it was super frustrating because I would have this moment of inspiration. I would get so excited. And then I would go sit down to write, and the inspiration would leave me. And then I would just sit there staring at the cursor, like blinking on the screen. And I'm like, this is terrible. Who writes? Like maybe I'm not supposed to be a writer because this is awful. But then I read this book and I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to sit here and write until I come up with something. And so I started really journaling. And sometimes I would just sit there and write. I don't really know what to write. This is ridiculous. This is never going to work. And I would write along those lines for like 15 minutes, and then I would go about my day. And the next day it would get better, and the next day was better. And then before you know it, I could sit down and write. Like now, the vast majority of time, I don't need some sort of inspiration. I can just sit down and start writing. And I have topics that are set out because I have a schedule of what
what I want to write about and when I want to write about them, those things. And so I just start writing. The vast majority of the time. Every once in a while I'll have a problem, but then I can just walk away and come back later, and it usually works itself out. So then people ask me, what do you write about? Well, I usually started with a journal because that was the easiest thing to write about, you know, what my problems were, what I was frustrated with, what I was struggling with. Sometimes I would explore things that I've been thinking about. There's usually a problem that I'm turning over in my head trying to figure out. Another idea that I've written about is your opinion on a TV show that you've been watching. I love to watch documentaries. I like to watch a lot of true crime documentaries. And one of the few, like, not so great TV shows that I watch is 90 Day Fiancé. And I have an endless amount of opinions about 90 Day Fiancé. So I can write about that anytime. But it's really anything that you want to write about, a podcast that you've been listening to, a hobby that you have. One of the things that I can write about forever and talk about constantly is I used to watch NASCAR. I love race cars. So I can talk endlessly about what's wrong with NASCAR and what's broken with it and what needs to be fixed and what I would do and how to fix it and all that kind of stuff. So the point is just to start writing. It doesn't really matter what it is. It doesn't need to be something that you're using in the future for anything. It doesn't need to be something that you're showing to everybody or anybody really. Just get started writing. So then once you get started, you'll be able to write about what you're hoping to write about later. And then next week, we're going to talk about how to establish a writing routine on the podcast. So make sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss it. My podcast is called The Quiet Ones, and it's available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure that you go and subscribe. All right. I always try to edit and write at the same time so I can save time during the editing process. It's really difficult though because I get stuck wanting everything I write to be perfect. How do I get past this? Well, you kind of answered your own question. You have to stop writing and editing at the same time. It doesn't work. It doesn't work for everybody. I know it sounds like a good idea, right? Because you can like kill two birds with one stone, but it never works. So the first thing that you need to do is just write. Stop judging yourself. Stop worrying about if you have the perfect words. Stop worrying about if what you're writing fits in with the overall project of what you're writing. Just start writing. And then after you've written, walk away for a while. Don't immediately go back and start editing it. Walk away for a while. Maybe it's a day. Maybe it's a week, maybe it's a month, and then you can edit it later. I always have this problem of when I'm writing, I feel like what I'm writing is terrible and horrible and awful, and it's really bad. And so then if I edit it then I get stuck in this perfectionism and, you know, not being good enough and all of that jazz. And then what happens is I'll walk away, and then when I'm away, I start thinking, that was really bad. Like, there's nothing good in that. It's really terrible. So then I don't look at it for a while. And then when I go back and read it, I'm like, wow, I wrote this? Like, this is really good. I don't know why I thought it was so bad. So I would encourage you, don't combine those two things. Those steps are not supposed to be together. Just write without judgment, and then edit later. Okay. I'm a teacher and I want to write, but I feel completely drained at the end of the day. How do I get started writing when I don't have the time or the energy? This is something that I've experienced recently that has been really life-changing for me. So I've been single for the majority of my life. I'm almost 40 years old. I've lived by myself for a long time. And the last few years I've worked from home too. So I had plenty of time to do whatever I wanted and to recharge the way that I wanted. So when people told me they felt drained, I was like, well, that's just an excuse, right? So then my niece came to live with me in April of this year. She was 18. She's 19 now. And then a few months later, she got a puppy, a golden retriever puppy who was 15 weeks old. He is almost 7 months old now, and he's 50 pounds. He's a mess. And I'm not a dog person, right? So he's just a total mess. But my point is, now I have somebody else in my house who wants attention all the time, who doesn't want to do anything by herself. She doesn't want to go to the store by herself. She doesn't want to really watch TV by herself. She doesn't want to cook dinner by herself. Everything is a family event, right? And even on the weekends, like yesterday was Sunday, and we took Goose, is the dog, that's his name. We took Goose to the beach, and it's a fiasco. You can't just get in the car and go to the beach. Like when I used to go to the beach, I just get in the car, right? I'm ready to go. No, not with Goose. No, he has to go outside, and then he needs water, and then you need water to wash him off, and then you need not one but two towels, and then you need something to entertain him in the car because it's a 20-minute ride over to the beach. And if you don't have all of his paraphernalia, then something's going to be really wrong. So it's very challenging trying to get all of his stuff together, right? So by the time you do all of that, and then you go to the beach and you mess with him while he's at the beach because he's still learning manners and he has a long way to go, then it's a mess trying to clean him off, all the sand off of his paws and everything. And then when he gets home, he has to have a bath. And it's like this thing that used to take like an hour and a half, now it takes like 5 hours just to go to the beach for 30 minutes. And then it's like, oh, we have to run to the store because we need something that we don't have for dinner, and dinner is a whole production. And yeah, by the end of the day, you're completely exhausted. I totally get it now. Like, you don't feel like you have time to do anything at all. And there's no time for yourself if you don't make time. I've been really struggling with this for the past, it's been more than 6 months now. But it took me a couple of months to realize that I was exhausted because I didn't have any time for myself. And we, as INFJs, we need that time for ourselves. So what I do is I prioritize that time, right? You have time for the things that you prioritize. You have time for lunch and for dinner because that's important to you, right? You can't keep going if you don't eat. So you make it a priority and you have time. And the same goes with spending time alone, recharging, and spending time writing. You just have to make it a priority. So whether that is, spending time on your lunch break, getting up earlier, or writing before you go to bed. Another thing that I look at too is how much time are you spending on your phone? How much time do you spend watching TV? I have a really bad habit of reading the news. I don't watch the news, but I do like to read it on websites. And I know that I spend at least an hour, if not more. So if I was looking for something that I need to stop doing or that I can, part with, that would be the thing that I would start with first, right? Spending too much time on my phone. But the point is, there's always time. You just have to make it a priority. My dad used to ask me, how bad do you want it? He used to ask me that over and over again. I moved to North Carolina when I was like 25, and I really wanted a job around NASCAR. And I had to go through some really stinky jobs that were really bad. And there was one particular job that every single day was a massive fiasco. And so I got into this habit of calling him on the way home and telling him about what ridiculous thing happened that day. And he would always ask me, because I would be like, this is too difficult. Like, this is way too hard. I can't do this. This is like stupid and ridiculous. I can't do this. And he would go, how bad do you want it? How bad do you really want it? Because if you want to quit and come home, you can do that. But would you be okay with that? Right? And so that's the way that I think about writing too. How bad do you want it? Is it really something that's a priority in your life? Is it something that you really, really want?
All right, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and I will see you again next week.